country struggles to cope as temperatures challenge historic records. We'll hear what's been happening, what's gone wrong, and in particular how the NHS is coping. Also, Lord Stern wrote a landmark book on economics and climate change. Joins us now. Also, on the third televised debate between Tory and Labour has been cancelled after two front runners decided not to take part. We'll round up the latest and see what Tory party members make of the contest so far.
I can't keep on debates at all, and I'm extremely pleased that the post-one is important.
It is important that we get a good picture, and I think that can only be done in a debating style platform.
And do you speak proper emoji?
An upset crying face may not be the best way to break the news to the family that the dog is dead.
We'll look at some of the potential for making an emoji faux pas. Do tweet us your examples. We'll sort your crying with laughter from your words. But we'll start with the BBC News read today by Neil News.
Wales and Jersey have experienced their highest recorded temperatures today as the heat wave causes problems across the UK. London in Flintshire has seen highs of 37.1 Celsius so far, while temperatures are edging towards the all-time UK record of 38.7 in England. Within the last hour, the temperature of 38.1 has been recorded in Suffolk. There are widespread problems on the rail network, while flights have been suspended at Outer Hebrides. Hospitals and ambulances have reported spikes in demand. President Liz Bentley from the Royal Meteorological Society says these temperatures are likely to become common in the next 2 decades.
At the moment, we could still see, 40 plus degrees Celsius in the UK, an extreme temperature. By the time we get to 2050, that's probably going to be the norm for our summer temperatures, and extremes are going to be higher than that. So we had predicted that we would see 40 degrees Celsius plus sometime this decade. It has come early in the decade, or it's likely to come early in the decade. But as I say, it's still extreme for us, but it will become the norm.
The European Commission has warned that half of the EU is at risk of serious drought as the heat wave intensifies across much of Europe. 11,000 more people threatened by wildfires have been evacuated in France's western Gironde region. Fires are also spreading in Spain, Croatia, and Greece, where they have destroyed thousands of acres of land. Conservative MPs are voting again in the party's leadership contest, with another candidate due to be eliminated this evening. A third televised debate, which was meant to be broadcast on Sky News tomorrow, has been cancelled after Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss refused to take part. The pair repeatedly clashed during yesterday's debate on ITV. The former Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis, said the contenders needed to think about the wider impacts of criticising fellow candidates.
I think there's a difference between making a positive case for what you as a potential leader or any party executives want to do for a constituency, in this case for the party, for the country as a future Prime Minister. It's very different from taking time to be attacking each other. We need to all come together to do what's right for the country, to make sure that we win the next general elections and continue delivering good Conservative government.
The government is considering changing the way energy prices are set, allowing lower rates to be applied at times when there is less demand. Ministers are also considering making electricity cheaper for people who live near wind turbines and buying power from households with solar batteries as part of efforts to reach net zero carbon emissions. The English football's governing body is trialling a ban on heading by under 12s in England because of concerns about potential links with genetic. The Football Association said it would seek to change the sports laws to include the heading version. If the trial is successful, Mark Gaffney has this report.
Start of this season is the sports to deliberately matches at under 12 level and below, and will apply to FA county leagues, schools, clubs, and if successful, power will become permanent. Children aged 11 and under may no longer be put during training. England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland may guidelines proposals also limits on how much every older children should do.
Nottinghamshire's Police and Crime Commission has been banned from driving after she was caught speeding 5 times in 12 weeks.
uniform, all of these thermometers across the country. But of course, they're not everywhere. Some places will be hotter. You know, if you've got a lot of tarmac around, then your place is going to be hotter. Your car thermometer is not necessarily wrong, but it might be recording, you know, a good few degrees above what we're recording. It's not wrong in that given place at that time. But remember, unless we can keep a good eye on those thermometers, we don't know that they've been kept in the exact conditions to record the temperature in.
So we use the official thermometers, but of course it may be hotter in other bits of the country which don't have a thermometer. The other thing, of course, is in the sun it feels much hotter. You put the thermometers in the shade. Why don't you put them in the sun? Because it's obviously hotter in the sun.
Oh my goodness, if we put them in the sun, the thermometers would just go crazy. No, temperature is always measured in the shade, and that way we've got a uniform way to measure it, not just here, but also around the world as well. Many places have called, well, we're one of the hottest places in the world actually at the moment. Certainly London, South East England, East Anglia, and even towards the north of England, you know, we've recorded temperatures in the mid-30s in Celsius, and some places will be even hotter tomorrow. So we're still saying 41, even 42 degrees Celsius potentially in the East Midlands. That's not usually the hottest place. Places like Sheffield, you know, could touch 40, 41 degrees Celsius, and across East Anglia as well. Out towards the east of London, Essex, Hertfordshire, again, those numbers may well start with a 4.
Lizzie Rosini there, we'll be hearing her give us the weather forecast later in the programme. She referred to the Welsh record as 35.3. It's now 37.1. Interestingly, last week go back and look at the weather in 1976 when we had a heat wave and an incredible drought. Many will remember the 76 summer. Actually, the hottest temperature that summer was 35.9. So we are well ahead of those temperatures we were having back then. Let's talk to Andrew Plant, who is our correspondent in Neem Park in Peterborough. Andrew, let's just talk about some of the effects on daily lives, how people have been getting on, where people have been feeling the weather today.
Evan, hi. Yeah, I'm at the edge of Peterborough, being on a great big water reservoir, and the thermometer on my car today said 37 at one point. As we've just been doing, obviously that's not an official temperature. I wouldn't unilaterally declare it for this region, but it has been extremely hot here today. In terms of knock-ons, I'm just reading an email actually. It's come from Academy Fruit, who's closed to vehicles today. They've said they're closing again tomorrow. They said they've been monitoring the temperature of their classrooms. They've said they range from 28 to 37 degrees. That if they added pupils to that, it would go up by another 4 or 5 degrees. Closed again tomorrow, they say. They also add that they will be putting online learning in pupil classroom there, but they say we are mindful that the advice recommends not using electronic devices when things are this hot. So the pupils there might not even get to be able to do the online learning at home. So I think it's been a problem for lots of schools today, not everywhere. Some places are open, of course, most places in fact, but there have been schools that have had to close. For the ones that are open, the advice has been make sure you give people some sort of water, close the blinds if you can, use mechanical fans, but also do things like relax uniforms, so people have slightly looser clothing perhaps, and also if you've got sports or anything like that scheduled. Today really is the day, these are not the temperatures to be doing things outside. In terms of the workplace, Evan, I was reading today there is no maximum temperature for a business to close. Which sounds a bit worrying, doesn't it? But there is some health and safety rules that might stop that, where they say you have to have a safe working environment. So if they have a call on them, then people can be allowed to stop working. But technically speaking, there is no safe upper limit there.
Lots of people can go to work, some offices with air conditioning, of course. And we should say there has been some sad news. It's people really perishing while trying to cool off school.
Yeah, absolutely tragic news. In fact, that's a 13-year-old who died yesterday in the River Tyne. Robin Hattersley, he's been believed from Crawl. He was, it looks like, open water swimming in the River Tyne on Sunday. And was very sadly lost his life. And I'm afraid that is not completely unusual, especially when temperatures get this hot. That people do go for a swim in water that perhaps they're not familiar with. I'm not aware of Robin's exact circumstances, but perhaps they're not familiar with. There can be hidden hazards underneath the water. And it can also be something called cold water shock, where the water looks very refreshing, but it's actually much, much colder than you're expecting. In fact, some reservoirs have actually closed because they're so worried about that. Cheddar Reservoir, for example, in Somerset, that closed from Sunday through to Wednesday because they're so worried about the fact that you might be tempted to take a dip. Those numbers did go up, obviously, as the temperature rises. So the advice really is don't go
NHS, they say, to try and resume operations as soon as possible.
Where you are though, Katie, King's Cross, is also very disrupted, and particularly tomorrow.
Yes, I mean, across the country today, across England and Wales, the picture today has been one of speed restrictions being brought in as the day went on, in most places, in fact. And the point of that is to reduce the chances of things like the track buckling, because the steel on the rails can expand, and that's a problem that can happen. And also the overhead lines, they can sag as well in the heat, and if the trains are running too quickly, they can get damaged. So yes, across the country, the speed restrictions have caused some delays, and also a number of train companies running reduced timetables. Now tomorrow there will also be speed restrictions in place, and they'll actually probably start earlier than they did today, because the rails won't have had that cooling off period overnight that they had last night. And yes, on the East Coast Main Line, it's the only section of track where we'll see an actual planned closure. So between London, King's Cross and York and Leeds tomorrow, that track will be completely closed between 12 o'clock, so midday, and 8 o'clock in the evening. But actually a number of the main operators who run trains along that line are saying they're not actually going to be running any trains at all for the whole day. So again, definitely check before you travel. And the advice really remains, don't travel on the train unless absolutely necessary.
Katie, thanks for that. Katie Austin at King's Cross. Let's have a little think about the NHS. Steve Barclay, the new health secretary, has detailed the contingency plans that have been put in place to assist the health service through this extreme weather.
Well, we're seeing an increase in calls and the extra resource being put in places to manage that. But there's also a time lag in the data, because the highest point of the expected heat wave is actually going to be tomorrow afternoon. So that's the point of maximum concern. But we're seeing an increase in calls. That's why we put more call handlers in place. It's why we put additional funding in, an extra 150 million for the ambulance service, a further 50 million for 111, and indeed other support such as £30 million for auxiliary ambulances.
Steve Barclay there. We can talk to Professor Martin Marshall, Chair of the Royal College of GPs. Martin, thanks for joining us on PM. What can you tell us about how the NHS has been coping today?
Yes, hi there. The heat wave hasn't come at a good time for the NHS, which of course is under significant pressure dealing with a post-pandemic era. But the NHS does respond positively to a challenge, and it seems to be doing that now. There certainly is an increase in calls and activity in general practice and in hospitals. The health service has an alert system, a heat wave plan, which has been in place for 15 years or more. And it seems to be that the advice that's being passed down from the national alert that was made a couple of days ago seems to be quite useful to the health service, and we seem to be responding positively.
Tell us, it's rather grim, but tell us about the death rates that occur when we have heat waves. Because they presumably show up in excess deaths. They might not be recorded as someone dying from excess heat, but we will just see that more people die in these periods.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The death rates are monitored in both community and hospital settings over time, and usually the death rates are reasonably predictable, but sometimes something happens like a heat wave and you see a sudden jump in the death rates, what people just call excess death rates. I mean, 2003 was a very hot spell just for 1 week in August, and 2,000 more people died than would have been expected. Even 2 years ago in 2020, not a massive heat wave, but several heat waves over a period of a couple of months, and 2,500 more people died than would have been expected. So those deaths seem to be very closely related to the heat wave, in so much as they happen within 24 or 48 hours of the heat wave starting, and they drop off within 24 or 48 hours of the heat wave finishing. And when you then align those death rates to the causes for death, which is in death certificates, you can see that often heat exhaustion or heat stroke is cited as a primary or secondary cause of death.
GPs will be getting calls from people with conditions related to the heat at this point. Is there anything that you would want to tell us or tell everybody that, if you like, prevents or preempts the need to call a GP? Is there something that, if there's one message you need to get across, I mean, obviously it's looking after yourself, not overdoing things, but is there anything that you should be telling us?
Yes, I think the first thing to do is to
moral confidence. Thank you very much for talking to us. It's exactly 5:20. We'll have a quick recap of the headlines. Here's Neil.
It's the hottest day ever recorded in Wales, where temperatures have reached 37.1 Celsius in Flintshire. In England, Suffolk has reached 38.1 degrees. The runway has been closed at Luton Airport due to the effect that extreme temperatures are having on the surface, while there are widespread speed restrictions and cancellations on the railways. Scientists say almost half of Europe is at risk of drought because of the heat wave. Wildfires are burning across the continent fueled by the hot conditions. And voting is underway in the third round for the Conservative leadership contest. The televised debate, which was meant to take place tomorrow, has been cancelled after Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss said they would not appear.
Thank you, Neil. Let's stick to the subject of the Conservative leadership. That debate scheduled for tonight has been cancelled. We can talk through the latest developments with Kate Ferguson, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, helping PM report on the race for PM. Kate, well, let's talk about that debate being cancelled. As I understand it, no one had actually said they were going to take part, so they didn't pull out. But they just made clear they didn't actually want to do it. How give the impression?
Yeah, this is what the teams are saying. We didn't pull out. It was never 100% in the first place. But we were all expecting this big debate on the Sky News. We've had two so far. Obviously, that first one on Channel 4 on Friday night and last night on ITV. But today, this morning, it became pretty clear that Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, the two front runners, didn't want to do it. And they decided to pull out, and really the whole thing collapsed quite quickly after that. I think I will say that anyone that's watched those past two debates, you'll have seen the ferocity of the blue on blue attacks. They've been really tearing chunks out of each other on honesty, their time in office, tax plans. Rishi Sunak accusing his rivals of being more left-wing than Jeremy Corbyn. So it's all getting a little bit nasty. So I'm not too surprised they pulled out.
What was happening on the WhatsApp groups around the Conservative MPs yesterday during the debate? Because they must have been going a bit wild.
Yeah, but you sort of, like, when those debates happen, you get some backers of some MPs who will, as one of the leadership contenders, who will pile around each other's house, watch the debate and send your usual supportive tweets. But I think really, speak to any Tory MP over the past 24 hours, and they would say one thing, and that the only winner of those debates was Labour. You had Tories tearing chunks out of each other on their record, stuff that could be clipped up, used again and again by Keir Starmer. So I think they just felt it was all a bit sort of unedifying, I think.
Right, now, what should we look out for? There's a vote tonight. We get the result at 8 o'clock, I think. Is it about 8 o'clock?
Yes, that's right. Yes, so another round of voting tonight. So two things we should be looking out for. As lovely as the man is, I think we're all expecting Tom Tugendhat to drop out the race tonight, not get enough votes. So that would leave four in the race. Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch. One thing to look out for tonight is who does Suella Braverman's votes go to? She was the one that got knocked out of the contest last week. A big true blue Brexiteer. Liz Truss was hoping to hoover up really most of those votes, but some of her big supporters have actually gone over to Kemi Badenoch. So a bit of a scrap there between third and fourth place between Liz and Kemi at the moment. But the other thing I think we're going to look out for is Penny Mordaunt. She's had a very good start, but she's come under increasing criticism. And is this the end of Mordmentum? Forgive me.
I think it is the issue, isn't there, whether she peaks too soon. It's only the bookies who took her really to be probably the next Prime Minister late last week have downgraded her activity.
Yeah, they've slashed her, they've worsened her, or slashed is the right word. Liz Truss is now number 2. So they think it's probably going to be a Rishi-Liz final, which I think probably most people in Westminster think will end up that in the end. So yeah, Penny Mordaunt, a good start, but her campaign's been sputtering a bit recently. And questions about some of her colleagues have said she's been lazy as a minister. She obviously denies that, but they've gone on record saying that on radio shows and things. And also, I think questions about what she actually believes in, even though she's been in politics a long time and on the front bench clean skin, I suppose. People don't know her. She's not as much of a known quantity.
Can be an advantage, Kate.
Can be an advantage.
Can be a huge advantage. But yeah, no, it can also rebound against you. All right, so we've got the vote tonight. There'll obviously be another one tomorrow and another one on Wednesday if all goes to plan. But one candidate drops out this evening, goes down to Kate Ferguson. We'll be talking to you again. So thanks so much. Now to Ukraine, where this afternoon 6 people have been killed after a town in eastern Ukraine was shelled. 5 bodies found in the rubble of a house there in Toretsk in the Donetsk region. Another person died in hospital. This comes on the day that President Zelensky fired, or at least